Ever since I got my first motorcycle, I always wanted to go into dirt biking and more specifically into enduro riding. But there was always a question that was left unanswered for me. How much will it cost? Well, I've been doing this sport for about 1.5 years now, so I'm doing this video to maybe help you manage your finances a little bit and help you afford the sport.
But first, let's set some ground rules in order not to make this a 2-hour video. The type of riding I'm mostly talking about is enduro and hard enduro. While I'm definitely not an expert, I've been dipping my toes more and more into the beginner extreme stuff, so that's where my point of view comes from. I'm not talking about some simple dual sport riding.
You're up there.
Second thing, we will split this cost analysis into 3 budgets: bottom of the barrel, working class and the baller. I think these should be pretty self-explanatory. Also, I'll make sure to include the US dollar conversions for all price approximations I make. And the last factor is how much do you plan to ride your motorcycle. In the summer this might be more, in the winter it might be less, but let's say that on an average you'll go out once every 2 weeks. So that's about 26 times a year.
That being said, the first thing we need to consider is motorcycles. Here we're spoiled with options. We have 2 strokes and 4 strokes, Japanese, European, but even from these there are a few bikes that will stand out for the sport. And this is actually kind of the reason why you might want to go with something European rather than something Japanese. Look, the reality is that there's a reason why you don't see any Japanese bike, Yamaha, Honda or whatever, in hard enduro events. It just seems like the Japanese don't really care that much about that sport. The one exception might be considered Yamaha, but even they still use cable clutches on all their dirt bikes, so they're kind of far from the Europeans on the sport, unfortunately.
That being said, for a realistic good bike on a budget, you should expect to pay about 3,000 euro. Thing is, you can't go too old, since at that point reliability becomes a problem, and when you're in the middle of nowhere, away from any sort of civilization, you truly need a nice and sturdy, reliable bike. For that price, you can get something like an 09 to 2011 KTM 250 EXC. The thing is, at that sort of price point, brand is important, and here's why. Spare parts. The reality is that on a really common motorcycle, like a KTM, you're gonna find spare parts anywhere. Sure, back in the day there might have been one bike that was slightly better in some scenario than other, but at the end of the day you are buying a pretty used old bike at this point, so having ease of access to any spare parts you might need is really a must in my book.
For a slightly bigger budget you could be looking at about 5,000 to 6,000 euro. This is quite a big step up, because you're getting into modern bike territory. You could snatch yourself a 2016 or even 2017 KTM 300 EXC, and that's a proper hard enduro bike. It's a bike that can take you to any contest in the future if you decide to enter. And the good part about buying these bikes used is that they usually come with protections already on them. This was exactly the case with my 2016 KTM. Now, if budget isn't the main constraint, you can basically buy brand new. Any brand new 2-stroke, for example, will do an amazing job, and it's more than enough for 99% of riders out there. Maybe go try a few, if you can, decide on your favorite one. Here you can expect to pay around 10,000 euro, more or less depending on the specific model you choose.
Unfortunately, the bike spending doesn't stop here. In the first 2 cases, as I said, protection might already come on the bike, so you should be good. But if you're buying a brand new bike, they come pretty bare bones out of the factory, and that means you're gonna have to spend some cash on additional protection. It's just like going on a first date. You need good protection. Really good one. Now this protection can include stuff like hand guards, stuff like a skid plate, like a clutch cylinder protection. Realistically, you could probably get away with spending something like about $1,000 on all these protections. But hey, if you decide to bling it all the way up with triple clamps and stuff like that, you can go way more than $1,000 for all of these spare parts.
So the bike and its protection are all sorted now, but it's time to procure our own protection. Now, you might look at pros like Jarvis, Billy Bolt or Let Them Be Clear and see that they don't wear quite a lot of stuff. But the thing is, I am not Billy Bolt, and most likely you're not him either. And the reality is that we crash a lot more than they do. They can get away with wearing less stuff, but us, Gumbies, not so much.
First off, helmets. Any brand new helmet from a reputable manufacturer will do just fine, but never buy used. You never know what previous crashes an old lid might have been through, and as such you can never be sure about its structural integrity. At the bottom side of the spectrum, you can get a decent helmet for about €100. It's going to be pretty heavy, but it will protect you. Next up, we have the €250 section. Here we're looking at the mid-range, and this usually means slightly better protection, better ventilation, and lighter weight. And finally, at the top end of the spectrum, it starts from something like an Aero Aviator Ace, which is about €400, and then it goes up to 1,000. At this point, it's mainly a matter of preference, but any of these leads will provide good protection and a lot more comfort than the cheaper ones. Next up, upper body armor. A cheap one can set you back around €70. Add in a cheap pair of elbow pads and gloves and you'll be at about €120. Not bad, considering that your upper body is now well protected. Now for a mid-range option, you actually don't have to add up a lot more. Here you can get away with a similar setup but with better ventilation at about €200. If you want the best though, that's going to start at about €300 for armor and gloves. But this will give you the best mobility and safety while keeping you cool in the hot summer months.
Another really important part is boots. On the low end, you have something like this pair of Acer Bis boots that I got for about €160. They're good, they do their job, they protect your ankles, good enough, especially for a beginner. But really, if you want to upgrade a bit, you can strain for something like a pair of Alpine StarTech 7s at about €220. But if mobility and protection really is your one key priority, then boots can get expensive and you can expect to pay upwards of €400 to €500 for them.
Now the last thing we need to talk about is knee protection. And I can't express how important this can be. If you don't trust me, look at what all the pros have in common. They all wear knee braces, and the reality is in that this sport, knee injuries are actually fairly common. They're one of the most common types of injuries, so you want to protect yourself as nice as possible. And having a knee injury will definitely make your day a little more sucky, let's call it.
At the low end of the spectrum, you have your basic knee pads. I had a pair of those and even they did their job whenever I fell onto rocks or other pointy bits. And at €30 they are a must-have. Now, €30 will not get you a pretty version, so for that you'll need to fork around €150. These guards are much sturdier and will take in a lot more abuse. Still not a bad price to pay for your health if you ask me. But that being said, the best knee pads aren't actually pads. They're braces. I paid about €380 for my pair, and this is the entry level of braces. But even these provide a lot more protection than regular pads because of their hyperextension protections. And here you can go up to thousands of euros for custom made ones, but let's start at €500 for the sake of the argument. Now there are still some miscellaneous bits like pants and a jersey, so let's add about €100, €200 and €300 respectively. These aren't massively important, but it's still good to have some decent quality stuff. Now we have the essentials, but there still are a few bits that we need to sort out, and the main one is transportation. Look, chances are you're not living on a huge property up in the mountains, and since most of these bikes can't really go on the street, we'll need to find a way to trailer our bikes. On the cheap end, this can be free. If you have a truck or a friend that already rides, there's a good chance that he can simply pick you up. Yes, you are constantly depending on them, but it can get you started in this wonderful sport.
For a pretty cheap alternative, you can hitch a trailer to your car. I paid for mine about €700. That was brand new, it could fit 2 dirt bikes. It did its job perfectly. But truthfully speaking, the one best way to carry around your dirt bikes in transportation is a van. Yes, I am telling you to buy another vehicle for your already existing vehicle. My 2012 Ford Transit cost me about €5,000, but it's sort of the minimum that you need to go for a decent van that's going to be pretty reliable and fairly new. But really this provides a lot of conveniences, like shelter in case of bad rain. You don't need to load up your bikes in the rain. You can have a place to change, a place that's maybe warmer in the winter, and so on and so forth. The advantages are endless. But do keep in mind, basically you are buying another vehicle, so what this means is you're going to have to keep up with the maintenance on another vehicle. And that can get costly, of course.
Now, these amounts of money should cover the starting costs pretty quickly, but let's also think about the running costs of this sport. And the first one is tires. And on a budget, you're going to want to spread the lifetime of a tire for as long as you can. So you're probably going to go for something like 1 new tire, both front and rear, a year. That's all about. Now you are gonna lose a lot of grip by doing this, especially towards the end of the tire, but it will keep you running and it will keep you riding your bike, and at the end of the day, That's the most important thing.
On mid-budget, you can afford some softer tires that you'll change every 10 or 20 rides. And finally, a super soft tire changed every 6 rides will give you an amazing traction everywhere. But know that it will come at a cost. You also need to factor in a set of brake pads, gas, and a system like tubeless or tire mousses. This brings your budget running costs at about 300 euros, the mid-budget to about 800 euro, and the top tier one to about 2000 euros.
There are a few components on your bike that will require some regular maintenance, and one of them is the forks. So for the first 2 budgets, you should probably expect 1 annual service for the forks, and in my country that's about 170 euro. For the higher budget, you could probably sneak in another one of those services, so 1 service mid-season and 1 at the beginning of the season, and that should take you to around 340 to 350 euro. That you have to add in some engine oil or maybe crankcase oil if it's a 2-stroke or a 4-stroke. And yeah, you need to add a bit of money to all of these expenses.
Another part of the sport is broken parts. Look, you will break stuff. Maybe a lever, maybe a plastic or whatever else, but these things cost money. So on the budget side, you can probably get away with buying some second-hand replacements worth about 200 euro. While for the mid and top tiers, you can expect to spend about 500 euros in a year just for miscellaneous broken items.
Speaking of miscellaneous, there are a few things that you might want to buy for your home or your garage, like a stander, some chain lube, brake cleaner, stuff like that. So for that, on a budget, you could probably get around to about 100 euro for like the bare minimum. On a mid-size budget, you could probably get around to about 300 euro, and on the higher end, really the sky's the limit. You can get a lot of stuff to help you out in working on your bike and doing some maintenance by yourself and stuff like that. But really, about 500 euro should give you a pretty good experience of storing and working on the bike at home.
Now you have to understand that these prices can vary quite a lot. It depends from like bike to bike, from market to market. You might find some stuff a lot cheaper in the USA than here, for example. So all of this stuff it's relative, but it should give you an idea of how much it costs. Look, let's be fair, it's not a cheap sport, like no matter how you put it. But it's the most satisfying sport I've ever done, and trust me, I've done plenty. But the satisfactions I get from riding and improving in this are unlike any others. And also the community aspect of it. People I've met through this sport are great, they're amazing people. They're all fairly successful people because of that, and you have a lot to learn from a lot of them. What more could you ask for? Having fun and learning from people, all because of your hobby. That's amazing, in my opinion.
That being said, the total is 4,380 euros for the budget one. Now, it might seem like a lot, and it is, but it's really not as bad as I initially expected it to be. For the middle budget, here you get a lot more luxuries in the beginner one, and the 9,090 euros express that. And finally, for the top one, 21,450 euros. If you can afford it, this will give you the best experience and peace of mind, but realistically, you don't have to go this route.
Also, you need to realize that you don't need to start with the best of the best. You can always get along with the budget version of everything and then slowly upgrade your stuff throughout the years as you progress through the sport. That being said, I hope this video was useful. I hope I gave you a bit of insight into how finances could work in a case like Enduro. If you like this video, please give us a like, maybe subscribe to the channel, that would be really helpful, and leave a comment down below with some other tips that you might have on maybe keeping the costs low of the sport. That being said, also you can also follow us on Instagram at crank.it and then on TikTok at crank_it. And until next time, have a good one. Bye.